Okay, let's dive straight in. Picture this. A U.S. studio, April 2025. The air crackles. It's got this tension, almost like the final seconds of a big hockey playoff game, you know?
Game 7, maybe? Yeah, I get that feeling.
Exactly. And on the screen, you've got this stark image flashing up. Trump's tariffs, what was it, 25% on
And
steel?
then 10% on oil, yeah.
Yeah.
Right next to the Canadian and American flags. Stark contrast.
And then the headline just blares out, Canada and America, partnership or dependency. So right away, you know the stakes are incredibly high here.
And that visual, it just perfectly encapsulates the core tension, doesn't it? That juxtaposition of economic pressure, those tariffs, against the national symbols.
It forces you to ask, is this relationship equal, or is there like a fundamental imbalance?
Precisely. It sets the stage perfectly for the debate.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, because we know you want to get right to what really matters, we're going to dissect the pivotal moments, the real turning points of this live discussion.
Our goal, really, is to pull out the essential insights, those aha moments, I guess, that really shine a light on the complexities of Canada-U.S. relations.
Because it's not simple, is it?
Not at all. And thinking about why this matters to you, the listener,
Yeah.
well, understanding this dynamic, this dance between a huge neighbor and a close ally, it was kind of a microcosm, isn't it?
A microcosm of what, exactly?
Of the challenges lots of countries face, you know? Navigating global power structures, trying to hold on to their own identity while being so closely linked to a giant.
That's a great point. So let's set the scene a bit more. You've got this studio audience, mostly North Americans, right? And many probably have a personal stake.
Yeah, you can imagine seeing the little visual cues, some folks with maple leaf pins, others with stars and stripes, a divided room, maybe subtly.
And then the key players. First, Prime Minister Mark Carney. Sharp suit, seems composed, but you can tell he is watching everything. Very observant.
Right, and that composure, in what could be a really volatile setup, it suggests he's got a strategy. You kind of wonder what principles are guiding him underneath it all.
Then there's the journalist, Rachel Maddox. Sharp eyes, a bit of a smirk, like she knows exactly where she wants to take this.
Yeah, like she's got an angle, a narrative she's pushing.
And Victor Lang, the tech entrepreneur, he seems more relaxed, confident, brings that business perspective.
Adds a different dimension to the whole thing.
And keeping it all together, or trying to, is Saren Wayne, the host. Cool under pressure, knows this could get, well, maybe not explosive, but definitely tense. A polite Canadian showdown, perhaps?
Well, her role is just crucial there. She's the conductor, isn't she? Trying to manage these potentially clashing views and make sure it's actually productive, not just a shouting match. It's a tough balancing act.
For sure, and they waste no time. Bam. Rachel Maddox just throws it out there.
The big question.
Yeah, the big one. Look, 80% of Canada's exports go south. Trump's tariffs are hammering things. So is Canada basically just the 51st state? She just lays it down?
Wow, straight for the jugular. That's hitting the central nerve, isn't it? The core dependency question.
It's definitely provocative, clearly designed to, get a reaction.
Absolutely. Framing it like that immediately puts Carney on the defensive. He has to justify Canada's independence right from the start.
So Carney's response, he's quick, but measured. He doesn't rise to the bait exactly.
What does he say?
He points out, hey, these tariffs, they aren't just hitting Canada. They've actually jacked up U.S. consumer prices. Gives the example of new car prices, I think, in Detroit. Makes it relatable.
Ah, smart. Turned it around to show the impact on the U.S. side. Mutual pain.
Right. And Rachel tries to jump in, but he politely but firmly, holds his ground. Let me finish. Gets a bit of a chuckle from the audience.
Okay, so what's the key takeaway from that first exchange? What's the insight?
Well, it seems like Carney immediately reframes it, doesn't he? Instead of just defending Canada's vulnerability, he flips it.
Exactly. He highlights the mutual impact, the interconnectedness. It subtly shifts the narrative from simple dependence to maybe interdependence. It's not just a one-way street.
That's a really good way to put it. Interdependence. Then Victor Lang jumps in, the tech guy.
Right. Lang. What's his angle?
He shifts focus, brings it back home, sort of. He raises concerns about rising unemployment in Canada. And he questions the green energy push, especially its impact on Alberta's oil patch.
Ah, so the domestic angle, the internal pressures. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's that classic clash, isn't it? Immediate economic worries versus the longer-term vision, like green energy.
Lang's intervention is important then. It reminds you, the listener, that these big international relationship questions, they're always seen through the lens of what's happening at home. jobs, industries.
Domestic politics shaping the foreign policy stance.
Precisely. It adds that layer of economic complexity. It's not just about trade balances on paper.
But Carney pushes back, right? He doesn't just let that stand.
What does he counter with?
Facts, basically. He states Canada's unemployment is actually lower than the U.S. rate at that moment, 6% versus 7%, I think he said. And he talks up the job creation side of the green transition.
So, painting a different picture. One of economic evolution, maybe? Resilience.
Yeah, like Canada's adapting, finding new ways to grow, not just getting pummeled by tariffs or energy shifts. A clear difference in perspective there.
Okay, so we've had trade, domestic economy. What's next?
Defense. Rachel Maddox pivots again. She goes right at the idea of Canada relying on the U.S. military, implying, a fundamental weakness or dependency there.
That's a classic argument, isn't it? The underlying assumption being that if you're not 100% self-sufficient in defense, you can't be truly independent.
Is that fair, though?
Well, it's a common way to question the sovereignty of allies who rely on larger partners for security, let's put it that way.
But Carney, again, he stands firm. He doesn't back down.
How does he counter that?
He lists things. Canada's NATO contribution points out it's actually higher per capita than many allies. Talks about historical partnerships, fighting alongside the U.S. in major conflicts.
So highlighting the history of partnership, not just reliance.
Exactly. And then this was a moment he delivers this counterpunch. He brings up the fentanyl crisis, points out the drugs flooding U.S. cities are coming mainly from the South, not through Canada.
Ooh, that's a bold move. Shifting the focus to a security challenge where the U.S. is arguably more vulnerable.
You could feel the shift in the room. The audience reaction definitely changed there. It wasn't just defense of Canada. It was turning the security lens back on the U.S.
That was strategically very clever.
Yeah.
It challenges that whole narrative of Canada just being the dependent partner in security. It flips the script.
And then he lands the line, the one that really got the applause.
Which was?
Canada's not your backyard. We're your partner, not your pawn. Boom.
Wow, okay, that's direct. That's the emotional core of the sovereignty argument right there, isn't it?
Absolutely. A clear rejection of being seen as subordinate.
So a powerful moment. Where does the conversation go from there? Does Rachel back off?
Not really. She shifts tactics again, this time to culture.
Ah, the cultural influence angle.
Ah.
Netflix, Starbucks.
Exactly. She lists all these American brands, American media that are huge in Canada. It's a more subtle kind of challenge aimed at Canadian identity itself.
The underlying point being, if your culture is so dominated by another countries, how distinct are you really? It suggests dependence beyond just economics or security.
Carney has a witty comeback about Tim Hortons and hockey, playing the Canadian card. Lightens the mood a bit.
A classic Canadian deflection.
But Rachel keeps pushing. She basically says Canada is, quote, nothing without America. Really doubles down.
Okay, so now she's arguing it's not just influence, it's fundamental reliance, even culturally.
And Carney, he delivers another firm response. You're confusing cooperation with submission. We choose our partners. We don't bow to them.
That's a critical distinction he's making there.
Yeah, the studio went pretty quiet again after that one. He's drawing a clear line. Working together doesn't equal being subservient. It's about agency, choice.
Cooperation versus submission. Very clear framing.
Then, interestingly, an audience member gets a question, brings it back down to earth a bit.
Oh, what'd they ask?
They asked about the practical side of independence. With tariffs hitting hard, global emissions rules, a recession maybe looming, how independent can Canada really be in practical terms?
That's a good question. It acknowledges the reality of our interconnected world, right? No nation is an island, especially economically.
Carney's answer is nuanced. He says independence isn't about, total isolation or absence of connections. He talks about Canada's history since 1867, its role in peacekeeping. Connection, but not subservience.
So defining independence in a modern, connected context.
But Rachel jumps back in, hammering that cultural point again. How Canada just seems to mirror American trends. Hollywood, fast food, tech.
Her persistence on that cultural front really shows how deeply embedded those perceptions can be. It's a tough narrative to shift.
Which is maybe why Carney then pivots to Canadian achievements. He starts listing specific breakthroughs.
Like what?
Insulin, artificial intelligence highlights Canadian pioneers, the Canadarm, obviously, real tangible contributions.
Ah, countering the cultural mirror idea with concrete examples of Canadian innovation and global impact. Smart.
And he lands another strong line. Our legacy speaks louder than your assumptions. The crowd definitely responded to that.
Asserting Canada's distinct history of contribution.
But even then, Rachel insists, that the Canadian economy is unraveling under the tariff. She won't let that go. The tension just stays high.
It's a real clash of narratives.
Yeah.
Economic struggle versus national resilience and contribution.
And then things take a dramatic turn. Victor Lang, the tech guy, drops a bombshell.
Oh, why now?
He accuses the Canadian government, Carney's government, of negotiating a secret backroom deal, offering Canadian water resources to the U.S. to get out from under the tariffs.
Whoa, trading water. That's huge. That kind of accusation, especially about a vital resource like water, hits right at national sovereignty, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It implies a desperate measure, undermining the government's integrity, designed to provoke, for sure.
How does Carney react to that?
His denial is instant and forceful. Canada's lakes are not for sale. Very clear, very firm.
An unequivocal rejection, underscoring that some things are just non-negotiable.
But you feel like Rachel sees an opening? Maybe. She comes back with one final jab. The ultimate insult, really.
Go on.
She just looks at Carney and says, Canada is the 51st state just dressed in a nicer suit.
Ouch. That's the culmination of her whole argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
Reducing Canada to just a superficial imitation.
The silence after that was heavy. You could feel everyone processing it. It's the direct challenge to sovereignty, to identity, all rolled into one.
So how does Carney close it? What's his final response?
It's powerful. He doesn't shout, but his voice is firm. He talks about Canada not just as an economy, but as a nation. 40 million people shaped by resilience. He mentions Vimy Ridge, peacekeeping history again.
Appealing to that deeper sense of Canadian identity and history.
Right. And he reiterates those innovations, insulin, the Canadarm, but then throws in Tim Hortons again, almost defiantly.
Bringing it back to those cultural touchstones, too.
And then something amazing happens. Spontaneously, some Canadians in the audience start chanting, just Canada!
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it starts small, then grows louder. People are getting to their feet, some waving little flags they had. It's this incredible, unplanned display of national pride right there in the studio.
That's a powerful, visceral response, isn't it? A direct answer from the people to all those challenges to their identity.
Definitely. And as the chanting kind of fades, Carney looks out and delivers his final line. Quietly, but with real force.
What does he say?
That's Canada. We bend, yes, but we don't break. Not to tariffs, not to threats, not ever.
Wow. That's quite the closing statement.
The place just erupted in applause then. Even Rachel Maddox looked a bit taken aback by the whole audience reaction.
It encapsulates that whole idea of resilience, doesn't it? An unwavering commitment to sovereignty, even under pressure.
So, looking back at this whole deep dive, this intense exchange, we really saw that fundamental question play out, didn't we? Partnership or dependency?
Absolutely. And it's clear there are such strong, deeply held views on both sides. It's not a simple answer.
I think the key insight for you listening is realizing how these seemingly straightforward economic or political debates are just so tangled up with national identity, with how a country sees itself, and that delicate power balance.
It's never just about the numbers. There's always emotion, history, identity involved.
And the impact was immediate, apparently. Hashtags like, Canada is not 51st state, started trending. Memes popped up Carney in a hockey jersey pouring maple syrup on U.S. trade policy.
That's predictable.
News outlets everywhere, CTV, CNN, BBC, they all pick up on the audience chanting and Carney's final bend but don't break line. It clearly struck a nerve, resonated way beyond that studio.
It shows how powerfully that whole exchange tapped into something fundamental about national pride and how nations see themselves on the world stage.
You can almost picture Carney backstage afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Just a quiet moment, maybe a sense of resolve, thinking about what it really means to be Canadian after facing down that 51st state insult head on.
Yeah, that kind of moment probably crystallizes the responsibility leaders feel, to articulate and defend their nation's identity.
So maybe the final thought for you to chew on is this. We saw a really powerful defense of national identity against some serious economic and cultural headwinds. What does real independence even look like today in a world so tightly connected?
And how do nations assert their unique identity, their sovereignty, when they have such close, complex partnerships?
Leaves you with that image, doesn't it? Canada bending, maybe under pressure.
But never breaking.